Now to the deadly Max attack trial. Days before closing arguments, Jeremy Christian's lawyers tried to switch strategies. Maggie Vespa is here now with more. Maggie, what's going on?
Yeah, Laurel, so Jeremy Christian's lawyers basically filed a motion to add extreme emotional distress as a defense, but the judge denied that order this morning. And of course, up until this point, they've been arguing that Christian has a diminished mental capacity and couldn't have fully known what he was doing when he stabbed 3 men on that train. Mental health experts testified about diagnosing him with autism and symptoms of PTSD, but none were able to definitively say on the stand that Christian was or is legally insane. All that in mind, the defense has rested. And today, prosecutors presented rebuttal witnesses. One of them, this Portland police detective who arrested Christian after the stabbings, and today described how lucid he was.
He was speaking clearly. His sentences were complete. He broke out of a conversation he was having that also was clear, and then noticed something that was happening to him and explained it he used humor.
So Christian faces a long list of charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder. He is accused of boarding that crowded Max train in May of 2017, aiming an angry racist rant at those 2 black teen girls. One was wearing a hijab at the time. And then he's accused of stabbing 3 men who either intervened or stood nearby. Ricky Best and Talija Nomkai Meche died. Micah Fletcher, there in the middle, survived. If convicted, Christian could face spend the rest of his life in prison. Closing arguments are expected on Tuesday, and after that, this case goes to the jury. Laurel?